It's a common problem and something that we as parents get to deal with all the time. How do you help kids with ADHD? Do you want to take that on, Vicki?
Let's do it.
ADHD has been kind of overdiagnosed.
Yeah?
Quite honestly. There are some problems with that. So let's acknowledge that right up front. Sometimes kids who are active but not necessarily ADHD, which stands for Attention Deficit Hyperactivity Disorder. By the way, it's actually an official diagnosis. But kids who tend to be active and energetic sometimes get labeled as ADHD by parents or teachers or other people who would love to have them just calm down and sit quietly, which kids don't do very well.
It's not in their nature all the time.
Right, because of who they are and how they're designed. So it gets overdiagnosed sometimes.
Can I just say one thing too? It does get overdiagnosed. Beware of using a diagnosis as an adjective. In any type of diagnosis as an adjective to describe a child. It is kind of offensive to those who actually have the diagnosis. And it is a real problem. We do want to talk about it because it is a real problem. And it doesn't mean anything about the child or the parenting. It just is a kind of a description of some of the challenges that child is facing and how we have to meet them.
In fact, in psychology, the diagnosis for ADHD is behavioral. In other words, if they do these things, and there's certain criteria that are set up, there's no blood test for ADHD. There are medications that are often used, and sometimes we can tell, yes, we're on the right track when the medication actually helps. Because typically we treat children, medically speaking, with stimulants. Why would you give a hyperactive kid stimulants?
Because it works.
And if it works, that's diagnostic.
Right.
I think, and this is my opinion, I think that it's because of a certain part of the brain that's in charge of regulating your behavior that kind of gets lazy. And that stimulant wakes that part of the brain up so that then you're able to better monitor and control your behavior.
But the fact that it is a behavior diagnosis, basically a diagnosis of the behavior, let's talk about some things we can do to help deal with this child with ADHD.
Right. And even if they're not officially diagnosed, I think that these principles will be helpful if you've got a child who's extra energetic or active.
And I've had some of those of my own, and I work with a lot of children with this just abundance of energy and spirit. So let's talk about some things that we can do to help them, because remember, our main goal is to help this child be successful, right? And they feel it when they're out of control or when they're being different. So let's talk about some things that we can do to help them.
Starting with the philosophical foundation for that, what is it what they're trying to help them to do? To regulate their own behavior in a better way. With that in mind, let's give them a task.
A lot of the times we see this behavior, this active behavior, when they're trying to focus on a task. So let's talk about the task.
This could be any task, really. It could be to clean their room. It could be to
set the
do
table.
Their homework, set the table, treat their siblings with respect. Whatever the task is, it has to be something that they can handle.
Okay.
How can you tell if your child can handle a task?
Well, now I want to back up just a minute on that, because a lot of the time a child with ADHD hasn't handled the task. That's the problem.
They don't have any
But that
history
doesn't
of
mean
it.
that they can't.
Yes.
So one of the big tricks that you're going to want to do with a child with ADHD is you're going to break it down into smaller tasks. The biggest thing is most children with ADHD or a lot of hyperactivity or energy, they hear the first thing that you say in a 3-part step, and they never hear the other 2. They have no idea that after you pick up your bedroom, you were supposed to get your shoes and socks and meet me by the door to go.
Or they only hear the last one and they meet you by the door.
Right, without ever having done it. So you want to break it up into steps that they can handle. Now I'm going to give you another tip that is really helpful for kids with ADHD and can be helpful for all kids, especially young. They will brush their teeth, and then the towel is not hung up. It's thrown on the ground. or they don't comb their hair or whatever. So if you have a picture list of the things that they need to do, and you help them remember or learn to refer back. So when the child comes out and they've brushed their teeth, but the towel is on the floor in the bathroom, you're going to go back to the list and you have a little picture of the teeth being brushed and the towel being hung up and say, okay, which part did you do? All right, you did this one. Okay, this is your next step. What's going to happen next? The advantage to doing this is a child with ADHD, when they get into, say, junior high, there is no one kind of holding their hand. In elementary school, a lot of the times the teachers will kind of come back and refer and remind them what the steps are. If you can teach them this life skill of referring back to a list, it can help them for the rest of their lives. Maybe math, they have to write down the steps that it takes to solve an algebraic equation.
Now, Vicki, you mentioned a picture list for younger children or children who don't have the reading skills. It could easily be a written
You
list
bet.
for an older child or someone who has that academic ability. And folks, this is coming from someone who has worked in special education now for a couple of decades. And Vicki has seen this work with kids so many times. So we give them a task in clear, simple steps that they can refer back to some kind of a physical list. Part of the problem with ADHD is that it's not being organized well up here.
Right.
So the life skill that we're teaching them is to use some tool outside of their own mind. This is good for you too, by the way, as a parent, because you got to track way too many things to carry in your mind all of the time. So having a system that you can trust is a great life skill. Now, after you give them a task that they can handle, you're going to back off. Typically with ADHD kids especially, they're just waiting for some...
The sixth nagging.
external, right, some external reason to do what they were going to do. And they're relying on someone else to track it and to regulate it. If you're willing to do that as a parent, they're going to defer to you all day long.
They have no need.
That's easier for me if you're going to worry about it. So we back off. No reminders. Actually, we call it reminding. You hit the word
Nagging.
a little more accurately. That's what they see it as.
Although I will add one caveat. Sometimes the reminder you might give is, did you look at your list? Rather than, did you pick up the towel? Go back to, did you look at your list? And the reason I say that is it really is a life skill you're trying to teach them. Remember, what is our main goal? Is our main goal to have a clean house, or is our main goal to teach our child to be successful? And if they're dealing with ADHD, we need to teach them how to be successful with ADHD. And there are lots of people that are, because of their ADHD. It gives them this creative power and energy. So let's teach them how to go back to the list.
Even with the diagnosis, they can be enormously successful if they learn to tap into their resources. So let's go to the next step, which is to let the consequences do the teaching. Instead of bailing them out, which we maybe are likely to do. In fact, there's the old 3 R's of parenting. Do you remember those? Rant, rave, and rescue. Where we bawl them out and we bail them out. And that teaches them nothing other than, oh, I just have to put up with a little bit of noise and everything will be taken care of for me. So instead of that, we're going to back off from the nagging, the reminding, the harping on them, which isn't helping at the end of the day. Refer them back to their tools, and then we let the consequences do the teaching. So let's say they don't complete their list, but it was required for them to complete their list before they could have access to their video games.
And there's going to be true disappointment when they don't get the thing that they were working for. Remember, let the consequence do the teaching, and you show up as a very compassionate, empathetic parent.
Yes, let empathy be your response rather than anger. Check it out. Sometimes we don't go to the empathy because we're so busy being angry that they didn't do what they were supposed to do. Let them feel the consequence for their choice. If you're going to anger, it's probably because you're about to bail them out of the consequence. Allow your kind, benevolent soul to connect with them in an empathic way, something that allows you to show them that you understand and care how they feel, but you're not going to bail them out of the consequence, because that's what's going to do the teaching. Remember, that what we're trying to do here is train their little brain to start regulating their own behavior. And you already know how you've learned your biggest lessons in life. Oh, your mistakes.
And then
right?
repetition again.
Vicky hasn't made that many mistakes.
Oh,
but
please.
For me, I know it's my mistakes. Why? Because there's a cost. Don't rob them of the cost. And then give them the same task. Again.
You want to give them a chance to be successful. Now, I am warning you, with a child with true ADHD, this might take multiple times again. And you might have to shorten the list so that they can have that success. Maybe you need to take that 5-step list down to 3 so that they have a success. And then add a 4th, then add a 5th. But give them the same task again. You know they can do it. You know they can do it. So let's give them a chance.
This communicates something very powerful to them. It says to them in a very powerful way, I trust you to learn from your experience. If you bail them out, it teaches them a very different thing. Oh, apparently I have to do the thinking for you. It's not what we want them to learn. See, we're going to engage their mind to start regulating their own behavior. I trust you to learn from your experience. Here, let's try it again.
Thanks for joining us. We hope you found something that will help you with your children. Please connect with us on Instagram, Facebook, and at parentingpowerup.com.
We're honored to be on your parenting team.